Every day, we're exposed to a variety of sounds. Some are soothing to our ears, while others are unbearable noise that no one can stand for long or even wants to be exposed to in the first place. But have you ever heard an extremely loud noise and wondered, what's the loudest sound humans have ever encountered? Is it, perhaps, car horns in traffic, the roar of airplane engines during takeoff and landing, or even the noise from heavy machinery in factories and workshops? In truth, all of these sounds are pretty mild when compared to a certain sound recorded back in 1883, considered to be the loudest ever. Welcome, I'm Katana. But before we start, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll get our videos as soon as they're out. To determine the loudest sound ever recorded, we first need to understand how we hear sounds and gauge how loud they are. Sound travels as waves or vibrations, which are essentially disturbances that move through a medium known as the transmission medium, with air being the most common in our daily lives. When we speak or make a note through some instrument, the sound vibrates air molecules hundreds of times per second, causing air pressure to drop in some areas and rise in others. This creates a sound wave that travels away from the source until it reaches our ears so we can hear it. The stronger the sound, the more intense these vibrations, and sound intensity is measured in a unit known as decibels, dB. Complete silence, for example, is around 0 decibels. A whisper is about 30 decibels, and normal conversation is around 60 decibels, like the sound you're hearing from me right now. But up to this level, sounds are generally acceptable. However, when sound exceeds 85 decibels, our ears are at risk of serious damage. For instance, loud traffic noise can range from 85 to 90 decibels. An ambulance siren can reach 120 decibels, and airplane engines during takeoff can hit 140 decibels. But even all these sounds are nothing compared to what we're about to discuss. On a calm day in 1883, on the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia, the world witnessed the loudest sound in recorded history. A volcano on the island erupted in one of the most violent natural events on Earth. The powerful explosions from the volcano produced a sound measuring 310 decibels. If that number seems hard to grasp, keep in mind that 310 decibels is enough to kill anyone close to the source of the sound, just from the noise itself. For perspective, sounds between 150 and 160 decibels can rupture an eardrum from a considerable distance, so imagine what 310 decibels would do. The explosion was so loud that it was heard over 5,000 kilometers away, similar to the distance between Miami, Florida, and Seattle, Washington. The shockwave generated by the blast circled the globe 3 times. According to accounts, an island around 17 kilometers from Krakatoa lost nearly all of its 3,000 inhabitants due to the sheer force of the sound's initial shock. There was also a British ship named Norham Castle, about 65 kilometers from Krakatoa at the time. The ship's captain reported that half of the crew suffered complete eardrum rupture. The explosion caused further disasters, including a deadly tsunami with waves around 30 meters high that alone destroyed 165 coastal villages and settlements. The estimated death toll was around 36,400. The primary cause of such tsunamis is the extreme sound intensity and the resulting fluctuations in air pressure. When these fluctuations are extreme, areas of low pressure reach a point known as zero pressure, essentially a vacuum, which occurs when sound intensity reaches around 194 decibels or higher. At this point, sound doesn't just pass through air molecules. It pushes the air itself, causing a compressed air explosion known as a shock wave. Now, one question that arises is, were there any other sounds close to this magnitude recorded in history? Yes, one of the terrifying human-made sounds recorded after that was the atomic bomb explosion over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, estimated at around 224 decibels. Close behind that in intensity was the sound recorded by NASA during the first stage of the Saturn V rocket launch, where they measured 204 decibels. In addition to these sounds, there are other noises that have either occurred as one-time events or recur periodically. One of these was the sound of the Chelyabinsk meteor, which exploded over Russia in 2013 in the Chelyabinsk Oblast, from which the meteor derived its name. The meteor weighed around 100,000 tons and traveled at approximately 70,000 kilometers per hour, exploding about 25 kilometers above the ground. Despite the high altitude, the explosion generated a sound intensity of 180 decibels, heard from 5 kilometers away. Fortunately, it didn't cause any catastrophic events. In the animal kingdom, too, creatures compete in producing the loudest sounds, especially in the deep sea. Whales are among the loudest animals, with the blue whale, the largest creature on Earth, emitting sounds underwater at a frequency of around 188 decibels. However, it's not the loudest whale. The sperm whale competes for that title, producing sounds as intense as 230 decibels. What's even more remarkable is that whales don't actually have vocal cords. They achieve this by moving air through specific tubes connected to the larynx. Now that we've covered the loudest sounds ever recorded, what do you think is the quietest sound ever detected? According to physicists, the faintest sound observed to date is produced by Brownian motion, the movement of particles in gas or liquid, estimated at -23 decibels. Just above this is the sound in room 87 at Microsoft's headquarters, an anechoic chamber built by the company specifically to better test technological devices' sounds. The room has a recorded noise level of -20.6 decibels. Finally, we should note that all the sounds we've discussed are those recorded in physical environments. Outer space is entirely excluded. So if anyone asks why we didn't mention this or that sound from space, now you know. And that's it. Who made it this far? Those of you who did, you're the best. Give us a like before you go so we know how many of you stayed to the end. And don't forget, if you have suggestions for a future episode, let us know in the comments.